Welcome to the deep dive. We take interesting sources and pull out the key knowledge for you, nice and quick.
Yep. No need to wade through everything yourself. We aim for those aha moments.
So today we're diving into introversion and extroversion. We're looking mainly at Susan Cain's book Quiet, but also pulling from, other research too.
Right. And the mission is basically to get a really solid handle on what these terms mean. Based on this material, get you informed.
Okay, so let's jump in. Have you ever felt like maybe parties drain you, even if they seem fun for others, or felt that pressure, maybe subtle, to be more outgoing?
It's super common. I mean, the stats suggest something like a third, maybe even half, of Americans identify as introverts.
Wow, that many. So chances are you either are one or you definitely know someone who is.
Exactly. And this brings us to something the sources call the extrovert ideal. It's this kind of unspoken belief in society.
The extrovert ideal.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that exactly?
It's the idea that being outgoing and talkative is just better, that those people are seen as smarter, more interesting, more attractive.
Right, I've seen that. Research shows people who talk more are often rated higher, even if their ideas aren't necessarily stronger. Fast talkers seem more competent.
Yeah, and the loudest voice in the room often wins out, doesn't it? Even if it's not the best idea. It means introversion can get a bit of a stigma.
A stigma. Like the word itself feels a bit negative sometimes.
Kind of. The sources say this ideal can make introverts feel like they have a second-class personality trait. Like extroversion is the default setting everyone should aim for.
That really makes me think about the Rosa Parks example from the book.
Yeah.
We have this image of her, right? So strong, defiant.
Powerful figure.
But descriptions of her were more like soft-spoken, sweet, even timid and shy. Yet she had the courage of a lion.
That contrast is fascinating. Radical humility, quiet fortitude. How can you be shy and courageous, quiet and strong?
It challenges that assumption that influence has to be loud, doesn't it?
Yeah. Completely. She wasn't like Martin Luther King Jr. with his powerful speeches. Her strength was different. A quiet no.
And maybe that quietness made her act even more powerful, in a way. Alongside King's oratory, of course.
It suggests there are different ways to be effective, different kinds of strength, and maybe our society, well, it doesn't always appreciate that quieter strength as much.
Okay, so let's get back to basics. What is the core difference between an introvert and an extrovert, according to these sources?
It really boils down to energy. Where do you get it from? Introverts recharge by being alone with their thoughts.
And extroverts.
They get energized by being around people, by social interaction. Think of it like different battery types need different chargers.
That's a good way to put it. And it's crucial, isn't it, that introversion doesn't mean being antisocial or hermit.
Absolutely not. That's a big misunderstanding. Introverts can be friendly, they enjoy people, they have social skills. It's more about the type and amount of social interaction they prefer.
So they might prefer, say, a deep chat with one friend over a huge party.
Exactly. Or expressing themselves better in writing than speaking off the cuff. They often think before they speak.
Less keen on small talk? Maybe. But enjoy diving deep into subjects they care about.
Precisely. And maybe less comfortable with conflict, too.
So, for anyone listening, it might be useful to think about this. The book has a sort of quick self-check, 5 points.
Yeah, things like, do you prefer one-on-one over groups? Like writing more. Enjoy solitude.
Care less about fame and status. Dislike small talk, but love deep discussions.
Reflecting on those might give you a clue about your own tendencies. It's a spectrum, of course.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, there's another related trait that sources mention. High sensitivity. What's the connection there?
Well, it seems there's a significant overlap. About 70% of highly sensitive people are also introverts, though they aren't exactly the same thing.
So what does highly sensitive actually mean in this context?
It means experiencing the world more intensely. They might be more affected by, say, beauty or kindness, but also more easily overwhelmed by noise, chaos, or even violence on TV.
So a stronger reaction to stimuli, both positive and negative.
Yeah, often a strong conscience, too. They might have been called shy as kids and maybe still feel nervous in situations where they're being evaluated.
Is there a biological basis for this? The sources mention research, right?
They do. Kagan's work with infants is interesting. He found babies who reacted strongly to new things. High reactive babies were more likely to be quieter, more cautious toddlers and teens.
High reactive.
Yeah,
Like more sensitive nervous systems.
that's the idea. It links to the orchid child concept. These kids, like orchids, are more sensitive to their environment.
Meaning,
They can wilt in harsh conditions but really flourish, maybe more than others, in supportive environments.
and there was brain scan research too, Schwartz.
Yes, fMRI studies showing the amygdala, the brain's emotion center in high reactive adults, is more sensitive, especially to unfamiliar faces. It suggests a lasting temperamental influence.
Wow. Okay, so shifting gears a bit, the sources talk about a big historical change, from a culture of character to a culture of personality.
Right. It's a really interesting observation. Back in the 19th century, the focus was more on inner virtues.
Like integrity, duty, honor, things you are, rather than how you appear.
Exactly. Think old self-help guides focusing on moral fiber. Like that story of the quiet shop girl doing good deeds secretly. Character was key.
But then things changed, early 20th century.
Yeah. Enter the culture of personality. The focus shifted outwards. Charm, likability, making a good impression became much more important.
And Dale Carnegie was part of this shift.
A big part. He started teaching public speaking not just as a skill, but as essential for success, especially in business. It was about projecting a winning personality.
What drove that shift, did the sources say?
Probably a mix of things. Industrialization, urbanization, people needing to stand out in bigger crowds, maybe anxieties about being overlooked, plus more focus on socializing kids for success.
Even universities got caught up in it. Harvard and Yale preferring healthy extroverts.
Apparently so. Sometimes even over more academically brilliant but quieter students. The focus was on the well-rounded, sociable type.
It feels like that emphasis hasn't really gone away, maybe even intensified. The sources mention Tony Robbins.
Oh, definitely. He's presented as a modern embodiment of that extrovert ideal. High energy, projecting confidence, massive seminars.
Yeah, the focus is all on action, radiating energy, selling yourself. It really taps into that cultural value placed on outward performance.
And the upselling the whole industry around it. It reinforces that idea that you need to be bold and outgoing to succeed.
So if that's the prevailing culture, what's it like for introverts navigating these, well, extrovert-designed environments? Harvard Business School comes up as an example.
Right. HBS is described as fast-paced, very demanding in terms of class participation, needing to act decisively even without all the info. Lots of networking, group stuff.
Sounds potentially exhausting for someone who isn't naturally energized by that.
Exactly. The sources talk about how some introverts there can become quite stressed or even resentful, bitter introverts,
Yeah.
feeling this intense pressure to be someone they're not.
There was that anecdote too, the survival game simulation.
Oh, the subarctic survival situation. Yeah, that was telling.
What happened there?
Basically, the groups that performed worse were often the ones dominated by the loudest, most assertive members, even if quieter members had better ideas or more accurate knowledge.
So good ideas got lost because they weren't shouted.
Pretty much. It highlights how easily quieter contributions can be overlooked in high-pressure group settings that favor assertiveness.
But does that HBS model, that assertive style, actually equate to better leadership in the real world?
Well, that's the big question the sources raise. And the evidence suggests not necessarily. Many highly effective CEOs are actually introverts.
Like who?
People like Charles Schwab, Bill Gates, Brenda Barnes, James Copeland. The list goes on.
And wasn't there that idea from Peter Drucker about effective leaders often lacking charisma?
Yes. Drucker observed that humility and intense professional will were often more important than flashiness. Jim Collins called them level 5 leaders.
Level 5. Like Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark. Quiet guy, amazing results.
Exactly. Someone focused, determined, but not necessarily the life of the party. Even Lou Gerstner at IBM, who could give big speeches, was apparently more comfortable in smaller groups.
So it really pushes back on this idea that you have to be the outgoing, charismatic type to lead effectively.
It does, and it connects to another point. The sources make a critique of what they call the new groupthink.
New groupthink. What's that?
It's this modern obsession with teamwork and collaboration above all else. Constant group projects, open plan offices, brainstorming sessions.
The idea that all good ideas come from collaboration.
Kind of. But the sources argue that we might be undervaluing the power of solitude and focused individual work. Einstein's quote is mentioned.
Oh, the horse for a single harness one. Not cut out for teamwork.
That's the one.
Oh.
He knew he needed solitude for his breakthroughs.
And there are other examples, right? Like Steve Wozniak and the first Apple computer.
Yeah, largely a solitary effort in his garage. Deep, focused work. Same with top musicians. Research shows they spend way more time practicing alone than in groups.
So maybe constant collaboration isn't always the best path. I think Jason Fried from 37 Signals was mentioned too.
Right. He argues modern offices are often terrible for concentration. Too many interruptions.
Noise, meetings.
Exactly. He prefers asynchronous communication, like email, and even had no-talk Thursdays to give people focused time.
Interesting. What about brainstorming? That's supposed to be the ultimate group creativity tool.
Well, the research is mixed. Traditional face-to-face brainstorming may be not as effective as we think. People hold back, or the loudest dominate.
But online brainstorming.
That actually seems to work better, possibly because it allows for more individual thought before sharing a kind of solitude within the group process.
Okay, this makes sense, but there's still that pressure to fit in, right? The sources mentioned conformity research, ASH experiments,
Yeah, the classic ASH studies where people denied their own eyes to agree with the group's wrong answer.
and the brain scans. Burns study.
That showed going against the group activates the amygdala, the fear center. Burns called it the pain of independence. There's a real, almost physical discomfort in standing alone.
Wow. Okay, so given all this, the extrovert ideal, the pressures, the value of solitude, how can introverts thrive? The sources talk about sweet spots and restorative niches,
Yes, these are really useful concepts. It starts with understanding stimulation levels. Eysenk's theory suggests introverts have higher baseline cortical arousal.
meaning they need less external stimulation to feel alert and engaged.
Exactly. Too much stimulation, loud parties, constant interaction pushes them past their optimal point. Extroverts are the opposite. They need more stimulation to hit their peak.
So the sweet spot is finding that just right level of stimulation where you function best.
Precisely. Not too bored, not too overwhelmed.
And restorative niches, that was Professor Little's idea.
Yeah. These are places or times you deliberately create to return to your true self, to recharge after being overstimulated, or maybe after acting more extroverted than usual.
Like what? Taking a quiet walk at lunch, closing your office door, choosing email instead of a meeting sometimes.
All of those. It's about recognizing your need for downtime and building it into your life consciously, without guilt.
The sources also mention a free trade agreement. What's that about?
Also, Professor Little's idea. It's about mutual understanding. If you, as an introvert, need to act extroverted for something important, a core personal project, he calls it, like a presentation you might agree with loved ones or colleagues, that you'll need quiet time afterwards to recover.
So it's acknowledging you might stretch yourself, but you need support to bounce back.
Right, and related to that, the sources warn against just suppressing negative feelings or discomfort to seem agreeable. That can backfire.
How so?
Those suppressed emotions can leak out later, maybe as irritability or pessimism, and negatively impact how you feel and interact. Authenticity matters.
Speaking of interacting, communication styles can be a real flashpoint between introverts and extroverts, can't they? The Greg and Emily example.
Oh, yeah. Classic scenario. In an argument, Emily, the introvert, might go quiet to process and calm down.
But Greg, the extrovert, might see that silence as withdrawal, shutting him out, which makes him push harder.
Exactly. And Greg's desire to talk it out right now might feel overwhelming or aggressive to Emily, who needs space. Neither's wrong, they just have different processing styles.
So introverts might be great observers, but jumping into a fast-paced argument requires a different kind of mental juggling that might feel less natural.
That's a good way to put it. Extroverts often excel at that kind of mental multitasking in social situations.
It's easy then to misinterpret introverts as being bad at socializing, but the sources push back on that. That little girl, Isabel.
Ah, yes, the second grader. A lovely story showing that introverts absolutely connect and relate, just maybe not in the most boisterous way. They have their own style of interaction.
And it's not just kids, even in sales, right? You'd think extroversion is key.
But the ability to listen deeply, to really understand a client's needs, often an introverted strength, can be far more effective than just being a fast talker.
This all has huge implications for parenting introverted kids. What advice do the sources give?
The big one is understanding and acceptance. Don't label them shy. That can make it feel like a flaw.
Instead,
Validate their feelings. Help them develop skills to gently nudge themselves into social situations they find daunting, self-coaxing.
like practicing what to say or starting with smaller interactions.
Exactly. And model calm social behavior yourself. Create positive, low-stakes social experiences for them. Find roles in groups where they feel comfortable.
Like maybe handling the scoreboard instead of being team captain or something like that.
Could be. Ted Adams, an educator mentioned, said introverted kids often have a different learning style, not a deficit that needs fixing by forcing them to talk more.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And this value placed on extroversion,
Yeah.
it's not universal, is it? Cultures differ.
Hugely. The West, especially the US, tends to value boldness, verbal skill, that extrovert ideal is strong.
But in many East Asian cultures.
The emphasis is often quite different. More value placed on quietness, humility, sensitivity, listening. Thinking before speaking is often seen as a sign of wisdom.
The Monte Vista High School example was interesting, where being smart was cool, even if you were a bit weird or quiet.
Right, a different cultural emphasis.
Hmm.
It shapes everything from classroom dynamics to how people interact in business. Even brain responses differ, that fMRI study on dominance poses.
Yeah, activating pleasure centers in Americans, but submissive poses did in Japanese participants.
It suggests deep cultural conditioning around assertiveness and deference.
And the Don Chen story about sharing an apartment.
Showed how different communication norms, directness versus indirectness in conflict, can lead to major misunderstandings across cultures. What's polite in one place might seem evasive in another.
So the extrovert ideal is definitely not a global standard. It's culturally specific.
Very much so.
Okay, so bringing this all together, what's the main takeaway? How do we navigate all this?
I think the core message is about finding your own balance and being authentic. There's no single right way to be.
Understanding your own temperament, your needs for quiet or social time?
Yes. And Professor Little's idea of acting out of character for things you really care about, your core projects, is powerful as long as you build in those restorative niches.
So you can stretch yourself, but you have to recharge authentically.
Exactly. Respect your own needs and respect the different needs of people in your life. Choose how you spend your free time consciously, doing things that genuinely restore you, not just what you feel you should do.
And letting go of the guilt if you need a quiet night instead of a party.
Absolutely. It's about self-awareness and self-acceptance. The author's reflection on her grandfather appreciating his quiet strength later in life after trying to be more extroverted herself really hits that home.
Valuing different kinds of strengths, different ways of being.
Precisely. Moving beyond that narrow extrovert ideal to see the richness that all temperaments bring.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the big points. Introversion is common, powerful, often undervalued. Energy sources differ: solitude versus social interaction. Solitude and deep work are vital.
Finding your sweet spot of stimulation and using restorative niches is key for introverts. And remember, these values aren't universal. Culture plays a big role.
Which leads to our final thought to leave people with.
Yeah, just something to chew on. In a world that often mistakes loudness for value, what important things might we hear if we learn to better appreciate the power of quiet?
What insights, what contributions get missed? Definitely something to reflect on. Maybe check out Cain's book or other resources if this resonated.
Think about how it applies to your own life, your work, your relationships.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.